Well, howdy and welcome back to the channel, folks. I got to apologize for not getting a video out last week. Hopefully I'll be able to hopefully this one will drop on Saturday, but you know, we'll just have to see. Weather has been partially a factor, and I've also had a lot of other work in my shop, so I wasn't able to get a video out. At any rate, today we're going to be working on this thing here. We're going to try to get it running today, at least see if it'll pop. It's missing a whole bunch of pieces, and so this may be a wee bit of a challenge to get it going. But stick around and we'll get to it. All right, well, first thing we're going to do is we've got to get this pushed back. Unfortunately, because the way that the lower AR mounts are bent, and the fact that we don't have a center link or anything tying the two wheels together, the easiest way to do it, we can't really push it. Yeah, I mean, you know, if I had somebody here to help me, then maybe I could. But at any rate, so we're going to pick it up with the forklift. We're going to push it back a little bit further, because once we get this, make sure that this motor runs, then we're going to be pulling the pack out. We're not, obviously it's got no water pump or radiator, so we can't run it for very long. But if I can get it to fire and run, I know it turns over, but we're going to go ahead and get her pushed back and get the wheels chocked. So that's what we're going to do. Whoops! That's not how that should have gone. But at any rate, it's back about where I wanted it to be, and so we'll just go from there. Don't try that at home, kids. Well, now that we've made a nice big frickin' mess here, time to get this stuff out of the way. I don't think I have any floor dry to throw down, so we may just have to, let me see if I can find some. All right, we did find some floor dry. So, but most of this all came from the oil bucket here in the air cleaner. Because this thing has been sitting out in the weather, it has gotten full of water, and so the oil that was in it has, of course, floated on top of the water. So we're going to try to get some of the water drained out from underneath it, and then dump this in our icky nasty oil receptacle. Okay, they have pulled the, somebody has pulled the parking brake lever off, and they pulled the speedometer cable off. They pulled the starter motor out, and it appears that they've gone ahead and cut the body right here, 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 and here. I'm not sure what that was all about, but at any rate, we're going to go ahead and get a starter and get a starter stuck in there. So now, before we go ahead and put this starter in, we're going to use this jump starter, or this battery charger, to go ahead and test it and see if it works. This is a military one, and it's actually a pretty, it's a heavy son of a gun. It's actually, you can see on the top there, it says that a 2-man lift is required, and it's not entirely required, but it sure makes it a lot easier. Unfortunately, I don't have anybody else to help me, so it is what it is. So we're going to go ahead and power this up, and we're going to hook it up. We're going to hook up the negative to the ground here, and then we'll go ahead and hold on to this bad boy and see if we can get it, see if it turns over. Okay, power switch is on. It's up to high. Let's see what happens here. Well, I would say that's a pretty good bench test. So we will put this in and see if it'll turn the motor over. Well, I guess they didn't take the whole speedometer cable assembly, which is nice, because these things are not, I don't know how difficult they are to come by, but you know, having spares is always nice. We're not gonna use the battery powered ratchet because this is not fully seated, and I don't know, I don't want to go ahead and try hammering it in there and find out that you know, I've broken something. Okay, now we're missing the positive to negative little jumper wire here, but these batteries are roached anyway, so we're going to go ahead and just hook up the battery charger. Let's see, that is the ground, and that one is the positive, and we'll see. That'll give us power, and we'll see if we can get this thing to see if it'll turn over. Make sure she's in neutral. Okay. Oh, that's right. Somebody cut the dadgum cables to the starter. That was rude. That just was not very nice of them to do that. So, I guess we're gonna have to do it the redneck way. Now we'll try it. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and spin her over by hand and make sure that nothing's locked up. Like I said, transmission's out of gear. Transfer case is in two-wheel drive. The battery charger just may not have enough amps, so what I may have to do is run a slave cable from one of the other 24-volt vehicles to this whole deal. But let's go ahead and turn this thing over by hand and make sure that we're not going to have any unforeseen issues. Okay, 13/16. So let's go ahead and let's get a marker and make a mark on the flywheel pulley to make sure that we need to be able to make sure it turns over twice. Once, but it is making noise back by the starter, so and it sure is not giving a whole lot of resistance, so this thing may not have much compression, but I have no idea how long it's been since it's run. So we probably need to pull the starter out again and take a closer look at that and take a closer look at how it all goes in there. All right, well, we got the starter kind of situated around, so I think it's okay now. So we're going to try this again. All right. That's a good sign. And I'm going to pull the distributor cap off and take a look at the inside there and see what it looks like. So for those of you that are not familiar with this type of ignition system, this distributor, this is a waterproof distributor. It is similar to the same kind of distributor that was used on the M38s, I think. I know it was used on the M38A1, which was the version of the Jeep before the 151s. The Dodge M37s, you know, except for they had 6 spark plug sockets there, because they were a flathead 6-cylinder. But these have, the coil is inside the distributor housing. Now you notice you've got all of these vacuum lines and vacuum hoses around the engine, and you would think that, you know, for a pre-emissions motor, what do you got all those vacuum lines for? Well, all of those vacuum lines are for the ventilation system and the fording system. But you have to have this stuff working, because what it does is it pulls. So all of these little hoses here, when they get cracked and broken, they'll cause this thing to run terrible. And what it will also do, because it doesn't have, you can't see it from the camera angle right now, but you've got one here and you've got one on the other side, so it pulls air through the system. And what that does is that helps keep the coil from overheating, because once these coils overheat, they're just done. They'll blow up. They'll burn up and they'll quit working. And unfortunately, coils, you can get new coils for these, but they're made in Taiwan or China or someplace like that. And you can tell them because the body on it is going to be a real shiny chrome. If you've got a coil that's got this kind of finish to it, then you've got one that's you know, an original U.S. made coil. And the Chinese ones, some guys, you know, can run them, and they've run them for years. And then other times, you know, guys, they'll get them and they'll run 10 miles and before they burn up. So there's no consistency with the quality. So I'm going to go ahead, and I got to get a 3/4 inch wrench to pull a couple of these loose, and so we can check and make sure that the rotor is spinning. And because I don't want to go ahead and try to put power to any of this stuff until I know for sure that everything is going to be is not bound up and is going to be working correctly. Okay. Okay, this one has not been converted. It still has points, and what's interesting is this screw that holds the coil in place was not on there. I'm not sure what this little piece of tape was all about. But that is kind of important. I don't know where the heck the other one is. So I am afraid that the other one might be down in the distributor somewhere. So we will see about that. Okay, we're going to crank this over by hand first and make sure that the points are in fact opening and closing and that the distributor is in fact turning. Okay, well, the points are opening and closing, and as long as we got the distributor cap off, and we're going to take a look inside here, and it's pretty filthy, but I've driven worse. So we'll go ahead and go get a feeler gauge and check to see what the points gap is, and check see if it's correct. Okay, we've got our handy dandy feeler gauges, and we have, but most importantly, we have the manual. This is the TM 9-2320-218-20. The -10 is basically the operator's manual. -20 is going to be would be organizational and organizational maintenance, which would be like your motor pool type maintenance. So let's go into the table of contents here and go down to ignition system. An ignition system is going to be paragraph 2-67 to 2-72. Now, I happen to know that the point specification is on paragraph 2-71. All right, come on, where did that go? That's 2-26, 2-27, 2-37, 2-67. This is the start of the ignition system. So the page number here doesn't necessarily correspond with the paragraph number. So you just got to get yourself kind of in the general location and then look around. Okay. So we have here, we're dealing with the distributor, and this is paragraph 2-71, ignition adjustment. So basically what it's saying is to go ahead and turn the engine over until the contact point, till the breaker point is at the top of the cam lobe, so it's at the farthest distance apart. And then the point gap needs to be between 0.017 and 0.022. So I'm going to set it at 0.020. So we've got the 0.020 feeler gauge there. And we'll go ahead and get that in there and check and make sure. Okay, as you can see that the contact point right here will pull the, well, maybe we'll pull the rotor off. Damn, that sucker's on there. It's probably been on there for 30 years or more, I'll bet. There we go. So you can see the points, you can see the cam lobe right here, and you can see that the rubbing block for the points is up at the highest point of the cam lobe. So we're going to take this 0.020 and set that right in there, and that slides in just perfectly. It's probably maybe a little bit smaller than that. So let's check and make sure it's not any smaller than 0.017. That's the 0.017 feeler gauge there. And you can see she slides in there pretty good. And yeah, you know, we might try adjusting it out just a little bit. So we'll loosen that up. And what I try to do is, is not loosen this screw up all the way. You loosen it up, tighten it down just a little bit. That way you have some resistance on this cam screw here. Now we'll check the 0.020 feeler gauge, and she's still a little bit tight. Now it slides in there nice and easy. And these points ain't in the greatest of shape, so we're just going to have to deal with it the way it is. So now we'll put the rotor back on, put the distributor cap back on, and we should be good to go for the distributor here. All right, the next thing that we want to do is make sure that we've got oil in it. And it's kind of dirty, it's kind of black, but it is plenty full. Yeah, it doesn't smell good either. But it'll be slippery enough to go ahead and get this thing fired up. And one of the other things I want to look at here is I want to look down into the valve cover, and I don't know how well you guys can see that, but look at that. Those are, I mean, it doesn't have a lot of oil on it because it's been sitting for a long time, but it's clean. It's nice and clean. So this motor may not have that many miles on it. So the next thing that we got to do is we're going to go ahead and put the cap back on, Okay, now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to try to get power to the gauge panel and crank it over, you know, as much as best we can to get see if we get oil pressure. Because I don't, like I said, I don't want to try to fire it up, especially if this is a low mileage motor. I don't want to try firing it up with the and not having oil pressure. So that's the next thing we're going to do. Okay, this one here, which is cut, is where we get our main battery power from. So what we're going to do is we are going to get out our trusty knife, and we are going to strip this back a ways, and we're going to hook up power to it, and hopefully we don't get a lot of arky sparkies and other nastiness like that. I don't know who cut this or why it was cut. I mean, it may have been cut during the demill process. I have no idea. But that should give us enough to clamp onto so we can at least get power and see whether or not we get anything to the gauges. All right. So we've got our positive power right here now. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is find our little switch piece, which should be on the, yeah, right there. So we're going to make sure that this switch is in the off position. And now we'll go turn the battery charger on. Nope, no arky sparkies there. That's a good sign. And now, if we've got power to the gauges, then we should see a jump in some of these gauges. And there we go. Got the fuel gauge that moved. Temperature gauge and the oil pressure gauge should not. But that means that we do have power to the gauge panel. That's a good sign. Okay, now before we go ahead and crank this thing over to see if we can get oil pressure out of it, I want to go ahead and pull the power from the distributor, because we don't have any fuel in it, so it's not going to fire anyway. But what I don't want is I don't want power going to the coil right now. There's no reason for it to go to the coil because we're not going to try to start it just yet. So we're going to pull this wire and this connector loose, and it's just a 1-pin connector. And now you have no power to the distributor. And as long as this center piece doesn't contact anything metal, you don't have a ground issue. So I think we've got everything just about ready. What we're going to have to do, though, is that we have to get power from the jumper cable lead going to the to power up the gauges, and you know, that also powers up all the sensors. This is your oil pressure sending unit right here. Temperature sending units at the back of the block. This is your fuel pump cutoff. This is only on the 151A1s. So what this will do is when it gets oil pressure, it'll actually send power to the fuel pump, which I would be interested to hear if that fuel pump works or not. So at any rate, we're going to leave that hooked up for the time being. But right now, we got to get a cable, and what we're going to do is I've got another heavy set of jumper cables. We're going to get that other set of jumper cables so we can hook up one from here where it powers to the dash, and then be able to jump to the starter. Unfortunately, because somebody cut those two wires, that's making things a lot more difficult and a lot more I should say rural Nevada engineering. We'll just put it that way. Okay, now we've got a good heavy set of jumper cables here. We've got one into the positive end here, which is clamped to the negative side of the cables, which we're not going to be using the negative side of the cables. All we need is one. So we're going to hook this one up right to there, and that should give us power, and through a big cable that we can go ahead and touch from here to here once we turn the power on. So we're going to go ahead and turn the power on. Well, we've got the power on. Now we're going to turn this on, which is going to give us power to our gauges. And let me go around to the other side. And we should have power here to go right to here. Well, let's kick it out of gear. There we go. So it's turning it over. And we're starting to get a little bit of movement on that oil pressure gauge. Because we don't have batteries on it, it's we're not getting the full cranking amps to the starter. All right, let's go ahead and let that starter rest for a little bit. All right, that gauge is not coming up at all. So we may have to go ahead and pull the sending unit out, and but I think what we may do first is we'll go ahead and take a look and see if we've gotten any oil to the top end of the motor. All right, let's look inside, and nope, it does not appear that we have gotten anything up to the top end of the motor. So the next thing to do is to come over here and maybe pull this oil filter off and see if we're getting anything up there, or pull the probably we'll go ahead and pull the sending unit here off. Just pull it loose and crank it over again and see if we get any oil coming out of there. We sure as heck didn't get any oil up to that sending unit, so let's go ahead and try cranking over and see if we get any oil to pop out. Okay, that is not working. Well, I think maybe what we'll do is maybe we'll go ahead and pull the oil filter off. I'm trying to avoid having to pull the distributor and get down in there and prime the fuel pump, or prime the pump. So let's go ahead and try something else here. Okay, let's see if we can get that thing off of there. Well, you can definitely tell that it didn't even pull. It hadn't even pulled any anything up there. And this is the stock. This is a GI filter. I don't know if you can see the writing on here, but and this filter has an FSN right here, which means that this was pre-70, I think it's 73 or 74, which means that this, now let's see what the contract date is. See if we can figure out what the contract date is. I can't really read it there. But I'll bet you this contract, this filter's been, this has got to be the original filter. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we try this? We'll go ahead and try cranking it over a little bit and see if we can start getting some oil to come up into the filter housing. Nope. Okay, we are going to try one more thing. We're going to go ahead and I'll get a little funnel. We're going to dump some oil right down in there, and that should take it right down to the oil pump. And then we'll see whether or not that'll go ahead and get things kind of primed and started. Okay, we got us a little bitty funnel here. And some old Dello 400 1540. We're just going to dump a little bit of it down in there. Dump a little bit of it down in there and a little bit of it down in here. I don't know what, oh, that was just, now we'll go ahead and throw this crappy old Fram filter on here. Well, first of all, we'll go ahead and crank it and see, because the oil's supposed to come up out of here, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember, but it's got to come out of one of them two holes. There we go. That's what it took. So let's go ahead and throw this POS Fram filter on here. And crank on it a little bit more. Okay, it's still trying to fill up the oil filter, so let's help it along. Well, it's doing it. What we're waiting on is we're waiting on it to start coming out of here, which will mean that the oil filter's full. And there it goes. Okay. Put the oil pressure gauge back on it. And we should start getting oil pressure. Well, it's getting dark outside. Sun has already gone down past the building. So we'll go ahead and take this back up again tomorrow.